Section 15 of the Public Orations of Demosthenes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Public Orations of Demosthenes, translated by Arthur Wallace Pickard. On the Embassy, Part 5. For when this peace was concluded, the peace of Philocrates, which Aeschines supported, and when Philip's envoys had set sail, after receiving the oaths from us, and up to this time nothing that had been done was irreparable, for though the peace was disgraceful and unworthy of Athens, still we were to get those marvellous good things in return. Then, I say, I asked and told the ambassadors to sail as quickly as possible to the Hellespont, and not to sacrifice any of our positions there, nor allow Philip to occupy them in the interval. For I knew very well that everything that is sacrificed when peace is in process of being concluded after war is lost to those who are so neglectful, since no one who had been induced to make peace with regard to the situation as a whole ever yet made up his mind to fight afresh for the sake of possessions which had been left unsecured. Such possessions those who first take them keep. And apart from this, I thought that, if we sailed, the city could not fail to secure one of two useful results. Either, when we were there and had received Philip's oath according to the decree, he would restore the possessions of Athens which he had taken, and keep his hands off the rest. Or, if he did not do so, we should immediately report the fact to you here, and so, when you saw his grasping and perfidious disposition in regard to those your remoter and less important interests, you would not, in dealing with greater matters close at hand, in other words, with the Phocians and Thermopylae, let anything be lost. If he failed to forestall you in regard to these, and you were not deceived, your interests would be completely secured, and he would give you your rights without hesitation. And I had good reason for such expectations. For if the Phocians were still safe and sound, as they then were, and were in occupation of Thermopylae, Philip would have had no terror to brandish before you, which could make you overlook any of your rights. For he was not likely either to make his way through by land, or to win a victory by sea and so reach Attica, while if he refused to act as was right, you would instantly close his ports, reduce him to straits for money and other supplies, and place him in a state of siege. And in that case it would be he, and not you, to whom the advantages of peace would be the overmastering consideration. And that I am not inventing this or claiming wisdom after the event, that I knew it at once, and, with your interest in view, foresaw what must happen and told my colleagues, you will realize from the following facts. When there was no longer any meeting of the assembly available, since you had used up all the appointed days, and still the ambassadors did not depart, but wasted time here, I proposed a decree as a member of the council, to which the people had given full powers, that the ambassadors should depart directly, and that the Admiral Proxenus should convey them to any district in which he should ascertain Philip to be. My proposal was just what I now tell you, couched expressly in those terms. To the clerk. Take this decree and read it. The decree is read. I brought them away then from Athens, sorely against their will, as you will clearly understand from their subsequent conduct. When we reached Oreus and joined Proxenus, instead of sailing and following their instructions, they made a circuitous journey by land, and before we reached Macedonia we had spent 23 days. All the rest of the time, until Philip's arrival, we were sitting idle at Pella, and this, with the journey, brought the time up to 50 days in all. During this interval, in a time of peace and truce, Philip was taking Doriscus, Thrace, the district towards the walls, the sacred mountain, everything in fact, and making his own arrangements there. While I spoke out repeatedly and insistently, first in the tone of a man giving his opinion to his colleagues, then as though I were informing the ignorant, till at last I addressed them without any concealment, as men who had sold themselves and were the most impious of mankind. And the man who contradicted me openly and opposed everything which I urged and which your decree enjoined was Aeschines. Whether his conduct pleased all the other ambassadors as well, you will know presently, for as yet I allege nothing about any of them, and make no accusation. No one of them need appear an honest man today, because I oblige him to do so, but only of his own free will, and because he was no partner in Aeschines' crimes. That the conduct in question was disgraceful, atrocious, venal, you have all seen. Who were the partners in it, the facts will show. But of course, during this interval they received the oaths from Philip's allies, or carried out their other duties. Far from it, for though they had been absent from home 3 whole months, and received 1,000 drachmae from you for their expenses, they did not receive the oaths from a single city, either on their journey to Macedonia, or on the way back. It was in the inn before the temple of the Dioscuri. Any one who has been to Phere will understand me, when Philip was already on the march towards Athens at the head of an army, that the oaths were taken, in a fashion which was disgraceful, men of Athens, and insulting to you. To Philip, however, it was worth anything that the transaction should have been carried out in this form. These men had failed in their attempt to insert among the terms of the peace the clause which excluded the people of Halys and Pharsalus. Philocrates had been forced by you to expunge the words, and to write down expressly the Athenians and the allies of the Athenians. And Philip did not wish any of his own allies to have taken such an oath, for then they would not join him in his campaign against those possessions of yours which he now holds, but would plead their oaths in excuse. Nor did he wish them to be witnesses of the promises on the strength of which he was obtaining that peace. He did not wish it to be revealed to the world that the city of Athens had not after all been defeated in the war, and that it was Philip who was eager for peace, and was promising to do great things for Athens if he obtained it. It was just to prevent the revelation of these facts that he thought it inadvisable that the ambassadors should go to any of the cities, while for their part they sought to gratify him in everything with ostentatious and extravagant obsequiousness. But when all this is proved against them, their waste of time, their sacrifice of your position in Thrace, their complete failure to act in accordance either with your decree or your interests, their lying report to you, how is it possible that before a jury of sane men anxious to be true to their oath, Aeschines can be acquitted? To prove, however, that what I say is true, to the clerk. First read the decree, under which it was our duty to exact the oaths, then Philip's letter, and then the decree of Philocrates and that of the people. The decrees and letter are read. And now, to prove that we should have caught Philip in the Hellespont, had anyone listened to me, and carried out your instructions as contained in the decrees, to the clerk, call the witnesses who were there on the spot. The witnesses are called. To the clerk. Next read also the other deposition, Philip's answer to Euclides, who is present here when he went to Philip afterwards. The deposition is read. Now listen to me, while I show that they cannot even deny that it was to serve Philip's interest that they acted as they did. For when we set out on the first embassy, that which was to discuss the peace, you dispatched a herald in advance to procure us a safe conduct. Well, on that occasion, as soon as ever they had reached Orius, they did not wait for the herald or allow any time to be lost. But though Halys was being besieged, they sailed there direct, and then, leaving the town again, came to Parmenio, who was besieging it, set out through the enemy's camp to Pagasae, and, continuing their journey, only met the herald at Larissa. With such eager haste did they proceed. But at a time when there was peace, and they had complete security for their journey, and you had instructed them to make haste, it never occurred to them either to quicken their pace or to go by sea. And why? Because on the former occasion Philip's interest demanded that the peace should be made as soon as possible, whereas now it required that as long an interval as possible should be wasted before the oaths were taken. To prove that this is so, to the clerk, take and read this further deposition. The deposition is read. How could men be more clearly convicted of acting to serve Philip's interest throughout, than by the fact that they sat idle, when in your interest they ought to have hurried on the very same journey over which they hastened onward without even waiting for the herald, when they ought not to have moved at all? Now observe how each of us chose to conduct himself while we were there, sitting idle at Pella. For myself, I chose to rescue and seek out the captives, spending my own money and asking Philip to procure their ransom with the sums which he was offering us in the form of presents. How Aeschines passed his whole time you shall hear presently. What then was the meaning of Philip's offering money to us in common? He kept sounding us all, for this too I would have you know. And how? He sent round privately to each of us, and offered us, men of Athens, a very large sum in gold. And when he failed in a particular case, for I need not mention my own name myself, since the proceedings and their results will of themselves show to whom I refer, he thought that we should all be innocent enough to accept what was given to us in common, and then, if we all alike had a share, however small, in the common present, those who had sold themselves privately would be secure. Hence these offers under the guise of presents to his guest friends. And when I prevented this, my colleagues further divided among themselves the sum thus offered. But when I asked Philip to spend this sum on the prisoners, he could neither, without discredit, denounce my colleagues and say, "But so-and-so has the money, and so-and-so," nor yet evade the expense. So he gave the promise, but deferred its fulfilment, saying that he would send the prisoners home in time for the Panathenae. To the clerk, read the evidence of Apollophanes, and then that of the rest of those present. The evidence is read. Now let me tell you how many of the prisoners I myself ransomed. For while we were sitting waiting there at Pella before Philip's arrival, some of the captives, all in fact who were out on bail, not trusting, I suppose, my ability to persuade Philip to act as I wished, said that they wished to ransom themselves and to be under no obligation to Philip for their freedom. And they borrowed, one 3 minae, another 5, and another whatever the amount of the ransom was in each case. But when Philip had promised that he would ransom the rest, I called together those to whom I had advanced the money. I reminded them of the circumstances, and lest they should seem to have suffered by their impatience, and to have been ransomed at their own cost, poor men as they were, when all their comrades expected to be set free by Philip, I made them a present of their ransom. to prove that I am speaking the truth. To the clerk, read these depositions. The depositions are read. These then are the sums which I excused them and gave as a free gift to fellow citizens who had met with misfortune. And so, when Aeschines says presently in his speech to you, Demosthenes, if, as you say, you knew from the time when I supported Philocrates' proposal that we were acting together dishonestly, why did you go again, as our colleague, on the subsequent mission to take the oaths, instead of entering a sworn excuse? Remember this, that I had promised those whose freedom I had procured, that I would bring them their ransom, and deliver them to the best of my power. It would have been a wicked thing to break my word and abandon my fellow citizens in their misfortune, while, on the other hand, if I had excused myself upon oath from service, it would not have been altogether honourable, nor yet safe, to make a tour there in a private capacity. For let destruction, utter and early, fall upon me, if I would have joined in a mission with these men for a very large sum of money, had it not been for my anxiety to rescue the prisoners. It is a proof of this, that though you twice elected me to serve on the third embassy, I twice swore an excuse. And all through the journey in question, my policy was entirely opposed to theirs. All then that it was within my own power to decide in the course of my mission resulted as I have described. But wherever in virtue of their majority they gained their way, all has been lost. And yet, had there been any who listened to me, all would have been accomplished in a manner congruous with my own actions. For I was not so pitiful a fool as to give away money when I saw others receiving it in my ambition to serve you, and yet not to desire what could have been accomplished without expense, and would have brought far greater benefits to the whole city. I desired it intensely, men of Athens, but of course they had the advantage over me. Come now and contemplate the proceedings of Aeschines and those of Philocrates by the side of my own, for the comparison will bring out their character more vividly. Well, they first pronounced the exclusion from the peace of the Phocians and the people of Halys and of Cersobleptes, contrary to your decree and to the statements made to you. Then they attempted to tamper with and alter the decree, which we had come there as ambassadors to execute. Then they entered the Cardians as allies of Philip, and voted against sending the dispatch which I had written to you, sending in its stead an utterly unsound dispatch of their own composition. And then the gallant gentleman asserted that I had promised Philip that I would overthrow your constitution, because I censured these proceedings, not only from a sense of their disgracefulness, but also from fear lest through the fault of these men I might have to share their ruin. While all the time he was himself having incessant private interviews with Philip. And to pass over all besides, Darcellus, not I, watched him through the night at Pherae, along with my slave, who is here present. And as the slave came out of Philip's tent, he took him and bade him report what he had seen, and remember it himself. And finally, this disgusting and shameless fellow was left behind with Philip for a night and a day when we went away. And to prove that I am speaking the truth, I will myself give evidence which I have committed to writing, so as to put myself in the position of a responsible witness. And after that I call upon each of the other ambassadors, and I will compel them to choose their alternative, either to give evidence or to swear that they have no knowledge of the matter. If they take the latter course, I shall convict them of perjury beyond doubt. Evidence is read. You have seen now by what mischief and trouble I was hampered throughout our absence from home. For what must you imagine their conduct to have been there, with their paymaster close at hand, when they act as they do before your very eyes, though you have power either to confer honour or, on the other hand, to inflict punishment upon them. End of section 15.